Welcome to Movies Are Life. I'm your host, Nathan Chandler, and today we are discussing all things life, death, banjos, car chases, fake suicides, and a romantic relationship between a young man and a woman who is old enough to be his grandma. Yes, all of this makes up the number 46 film on the 50 Best Rom-Coms list, the 1971 cult hit Harold and Maude. Today, I'm welcoming in Jenna Hodges Struble, who was brave enough to volunteer to talk about this film. How are you doing?
I am great. I'm so excited to talk about this movie.
Yeah. Did I pronounce your last name the
You
correct
did.
way?
Struble is perfect.
Okay, great. Yeah, awesome. So I'll admit we don't know each other super well. We probably came in contact with each other a couple of times in Texas through the YMCA youth and government programs and stuff. You've since moved on from that, so it's fun that we're getting to connect while I'm in Oklahoma and you're in Vermont.
That's right. This is so cool. I love the power of social media.
Yeah. So do you consider yourself a movie fan, a film buff?
I definitely am a movie fan. I mean, you and I have connected just about our love of making sure that we see every nominated film.
Yes.
I think you are way better at that than me.
I'm getting better now that my kids are older. It was harder. Yeah, it was harder when they were younger. And now there's more than 5 Best Picture nominees, so it's a little tougher.
So hard. But in a way, COVID was a little bit of a blessing with that because they released everything on streaming. Yep. And I think they see the value in that. And so, you know, in 2020 and 2021, I saw everything that was nominated, which is very unusual for me to be able to see before the awards.
Yeah.
After, but yeah, I love it. It's always been a thing for me as a former, you know, I went to theater school. And so every year we would have a big party around the Golden Globes time and the Oscars time and sometimes the BAFTA times. So we would do all the things. And it was just really great. And I love the art form. I love that it's a team effort to create something. And yeah, I just think film is magical.
Yeah, that's amazing. So, well, before we get into the conversation about this movie, with most of my conversations, we'll talk about spoilers, but I also want to caution our listeners because we will be talking about themes of death and in particular suicide, which is depicted often in this film. And if you can say kind of hilariously so, but just a warning for that. But with that said, let's steal a car and crank up some Cat Stevens and talk about Harold and Maude.
She took my car.
And Harold?
Try something new each day. After all, we're given life to find it out. It doesn't last forever. Oh, it's all right. It's organic. Harold?
Maude?
Did I tell you I'll be 80 on Saturday?
This is definitely a new experience for me.
Harold and Maude is a 1971 American romantic black comedy drama film directed by Hal Ashby and released by Paramount Pictures. It incorporates elements of dark humor and existential drama. The plot follows the exploits of Harold Chasen, played by Bud Cort, a young man who is intrigued with death and who rejects the life his detached mother prescribes for him. Harold develops a friendship and eventual romantic relationship with the 79-year-old Maude, played by Ruth Gordon, who teaches Harold about the importance of living life to its fullest. Critically and commercially unsuccessful when first released, the film eventually developed a cult following and first made a profit in 1983, more than 10 years after originally released. The film was selected for preservation in the National Film Registry in 1997 and was ranked number 45 on the AFI's list of the 100 funniest movies of all time. And if people are a fan of the Criterion Collection, they released a special edition Blu-ray and DVD in 2012. So anyway, I was shocked that you signed up for this film, not because of you as a person, but I was shocked that anyone I reached out to actually knew what this film was. So I'm assuming you had seen it before?
Yeah. I mean, in 1971, the 70s in general are such a great golden age for film. And that year was such a good year for film. That was the year before I was born. I mean, I am a Gen Xer. So we definitely heard about that film from our parents. You know, that year, I think The Last Picture Show came out, Clute, you know, centered around a sex worker, Willy Wonka, which was if you watch it as an adult, super dark, you know,
Right.
dark, Clockwork Orange, all of those really dark films, because Vietnam was happening at the time. The civil rights movement had just happened in the 60s. So historically, all of these dark pictures happening in that moment really kind of made sense. But this movie, as dark as it can be at times, is just magical. It's magical. And it's seen, you can see that through Bud Cort's eyes as he plays Harold. Like, it's just so gorgeous. So my mom loved it, but was hesitant at letting me watch it as a teen, and just was creeped out by it, by the love relationship, but also okay with it, and just wanted to get my take on it. Right. So we watched it together. We talked about it. And I too was put off by it because as a teenager, I could not imagine. I mean, he's an older teen, late adult, being with someone that age. But then you look at her and how Ruth Gordon plays her, and you're like, of course, she's probably has more energy and effervescence than any girl this mother is trying to set him up with throughout the film. She is more alive than most young people. She's incredible. And definitely not, as we see later in the film, this horrible description by this man, this psychiatrist, who's like, describes an old, what we think of as an old woman. And when you think about today, what is everybody saying about, you know, 50 is the new 30 and 70, you know, there's all these people that look so young and are really taking care of their bodies. Jennifer Lopez is 53. Yeah. And I'm sure a 19-year-old would be very excited to be with Jennifer Lopez, right? So there's all these like misconceptions, or I think ideas around what is defined as love that's different today. I think Gen X and millennials are more, or Gen Z and millennials would be more into this film than maybe when we were growing up in the 80s and 90s. This film is a perfect example of, if you tell anybody what the synopsis of the movie is, you know, they almost immediately get turned off by it. But, you know, if you start it, you get sucked in really fast. And the relationship between Harold and Maude, I mean, really, I guess when it culminates in, you know, the physical act that they showcase, it's really not really surprising, and it's also like, if you invest into the film, it seems more natural than probably a lot of other romantic relationships that you see on film. And you can see it coming because of the way that he looks at her. And, you know, this is one of the films that I always wanted to revisit. Like my spouse and I, when we were dating, I was like, how are they going to react to it? And they loved it. You know, it was still like a little like uncomfortable with the age difference. But honestly, when we examined who we are as people, I'm definitely personality-wise like Maude. She's definitely personality-wise like Harold. Like, love to have a hearse, you know. These elements of her personality that click and match. And so yeah, we love it. It's one of our favorites. Yeah, and honestly, I think up to this point, I mean, so on the surface, you see the age difference between the two characters, but you know, up to this point, we have had no kind of evidence that Harold has anybody else in his life that is his age, any kind of friend or anything. So I think just as like a young person might get infatuated with somebody because they were paid attention to, I think it's very similar in this regard. It's like, that's such a good point. Yeah, like, so to me, it's almost natural that happens to him. We might get into it a little bit, like with our rankings. Even though, you know, she even says, "I love you" to Harold, and you know, back when he says it to her, I still kind of viewed it, even though she takes that like physical leap with him, I still think there's two different types of love happening in this movie. So I think his is the type that people get turned off by. And I think hers is more like, it gets even more twisted to say more of a nurturing type of love. Yeah. I think But I think you're kind of right. Like she loves him and feels some sort of romantic love to him, but she also has already decided, as we later learn, this is not going to last.
Yeah. Well,
And
she doesn't need his love wherein he needs hers.
It's a nice experience for her because this is the time in her life where she's accepting everything and saying yes to everything and wants the fullness of life, and love is part of that. And so she lets him love her.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
And his love, you're right. It's different.
Yes.
It's different. It's, oh my gosh, this person has lit me up. This person makes me feel alive. I need to be with this person all the time, which you're right, is not the most desirable, but he's liberated in the end too. We see him grow.
Uh-huh. Oh yeah. Yeah. And I also don't want to take away, I do think this movie is like a, beautiful portrait and celebration of life and not taking things too seriously. But it also doesn't take away that this movie, I think, is hilarious.
It's so funny. The suicides. Oh my gosh. We see, the mother says there's been 15 suicide attempts, which really, to be honest, we all know are not suicide attempts. They are attention getters, right?
Yeah, right.
The care with which he takes, the clipping on of the note, the tie put behind his, like all these little details that he works out and orchestrates and stages are just so hilarious. The mom is hilarious.
Yeah, I think she's almost is overlooked. Vivian Pickles is her name, I believe.
Yes.
And I think she is so good in this movie. Especially, I love one of my favorite scenes is when she is helping him with his dating profile, and then she literally starts like talking to herself that she doesn't even realize she's filling out the quiz, just like how she believes. Yeah, it's so funny.
Are you uncomfortable meeting new people? Well, I think that's a yes. Don't you agree, Harold? Should sex education be taught outside the home? Oh, I would say no, wouldn't you, Harold? Yeah, we'll give a D there. 3, should women run for president of the United States? I don't see why not. Absolutely yes.
And I love this dynamic of like, he's done this. She's swimming. I love that shot where she's swimming in the pool and we see the cameras following her swim in the pool. And then you see him come into frame floating upside down in the water. And she just keeps swimming. She doesn't even really look at him. This is their relationship. And I was thinking these beautiful shots that they have in the house.
Mm-hmm.
He's doing these suicide attempts. And thinking not only is there this age difference with him and Maude, but really there's really deep socioeconomic divide and cultural divide.
Mm-hmm.
She's from Romania. She is Jewish. We know that later on in the film. But she lives in a train car and he lives in this palace. So of course there's no, well, I don't want to say of course, that's me supposing that people that live in palaces don't have relationships, but his mother and he definitely don't have a relationship or a connection. And he's this rich kid who is so disconnected from the rest of the world. And so, of course, Maude, who is totally comfortable being with anybody, is going to be appealing because she knows how to do it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, exactly. And even though, so this was probably only the second time I'd seen this movie. I'm pretty sure the first time I saw it was in college, just like when I consumed all these type of movies when I first heard about them. Or I think I'm also a big Wes Anderson fan, and I think he was inspired. He's been inspired a lot by Hal Ashby films, and so I think that might have also kind of prompted me to see this. And even I can definitely see where he gets a lot of his humor from, but even though I remembered the kind of fake suicide attempts and everything, that the very opening scene was still shocking for me. I just kind of had forgotten it, and all I could think was placing myself in a first time viewer's you know, in their body, so to speak, just to, you know, it is really shocking. And I guess it's a litmus test as soon as the mom comes in and just starts talking like nothing's happened. I mean, that's kind of, for me, like you had mentioned earlier, it's almost kind of like, okay, you know, how does this check with like how I vibe with another person, if they find this funny or not? Tells me. Yeah. So, but I also don't, we'll talk about a little bit more later about the soundtrack, but I think the music by Cat Stevens here is crucial to this movie, because his song starts, you know, underlaying this opening scene, which is also beautiful because it's just this long tracking shot. And I think without his music, the film would be a little harder to approach, especially from the beginning. He kind of has, his music is so comforting that like it sets the tone for the movie, versus like I almost would want to see this scene play it out with different types of music, just to show, like, so somebody could see how much music and audio can affect your reactions to things.
Oh my gosh, what a great fun project that would be. But I totally agree. I think Cat Stevens's voice and just the music, the lyrics are so connected with the film. And I love how Ashby's choice that it's Cat Stevens throughout. It's not different artists. It's really just Cat Stevens. It's so beautiful. And yeah, I love it.
Yeah. Yeah, you talked about some of the shots in particular. I loved the shot in the cemetery when it pulls out. I think that one was from they filmed a lot of this movie in the San Francisco area, and I had a list of where they filmed. A lot of it, of course, was different cemeteries, but that must have been the either the Holy Cross Cemetery or Golden Gate National Cemetery. But that just zoom out shot, I think, is just beautiful.
So funny. And some of the sight gags, there's so many really good sight gags, like the uncle talking to him about the military and then pulling the cord so his fake arm can salute. Oh my God. That's so dark and so hilarious.
Yeah.
The saluting pulley, the pool gag, the hearse.
Yeah.
When he goes to her house and there's the sculpture that is clearly female genitalia. And he just like puts his head in it and strokes it, like just so hilarious and very uncomfortable.
Yes.
Oh my God. It's great. And even, you know, on their date, her, there's so many little beautiful moments in the date where she's playing piano, playing Cat Stevens, and then she walks away to dance, and we realize, oh, she's not playing piano. To play her piano, and she could care less.
Yeah,
having such a good time. It's wonderful.
Yeah. I think it's kind of towards the end, but it's a series of montages of these different authoritarian figures, you know, like the uncle, the psychiatrist, the priest, and, you know, it's all framed up the same way, and they're all in these boring offices, and they all have a picture frame behind them of some kind of authoritarian figure above them, you know, and I feel like that shot, like, is saying so much, and kind of like what you had mentioned earlier too. Just I really liked the subtle things in here, you know, especially, you know, objects and, you know, like, you know, coveting the new car or whatever it be, but also appreciating, you know, plants and nature and that type of thing. But I think there's a lot that he's saying with his story about, you know, what brings joy and happiness in our lives.
Totally. That's such a good point. You know, after watching this movie now 4 times, I had never noticed the pictures of authoritarians behind those figures. That is genius. And I do love the production design, because he definitely knows how to build a world and to have those very specific sets where, you know, the old furniture, the stodginess, the almost museum-like quality of where Harold lives compared to her house, which is, you know, the moment he walks in, you can see Harold just, wow. You know, someone else might go into his house and be wowed by all the antiquities and the art and yada, yada. but he is wowed by her house, by the plants, by the colors, by all the softness, by the tchotchkes. It's so beautiful what Ashby does. I mean, even that one scene in their date, the choice to put them, I don't know, is it like a dump or some kind of dumping ground at the end? The sunset shot. It's such a weird place, and he makes it magical.
Yeah. Yeah, it really does. I think Bud Cort is, I don't know if it's maybe the best acting job ever, but he's definitely the right person and has the right faces for this role. But Ruth Gordon as Maude is just terrific in this film.
Really, really solid. I think they both got nominated for a Golden Globe for this film. And then he won a BAFTA for Best Actor. And I think he really, I agree, he's young, and so you don't know, but there's so much range there, like his serious deadpanness with all of the arranged dates to the total love eyes. Like, I just was completely convinced, and still on my fourth time watching this movie, and completely convinced that he might have been a little bit in love with Ruth Gordon for real. Like, just so great. And she is, I mean, doesn't everybody want to be around someone like that?
I know.
So effervescent and full of life and so full of wisdom. Those quotes. Oh, so many good quotes.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think speaking on Bud Cort's performance, I think I read somewhere it's not until like around the 6-minute mark that we actually even hear him talk. And so he's almost doing a like silent film, performance in this. Speaking of, so what do you write any like favorite quotes or favorite scenes that you have?
For sure. I think, all of the suicide scenes, the attempted suicide scenes are all hilarious and all such a surprise and so creatively done. But those dates, the dates that they go on, the times that they spend together are so beautiful. One of my favorite scenes is when, she loves to liberate people from their things and has stolen like 4 cars in this film. So when they steal the Camino and they're replanting the tree, sad tree, and they run from the police, and it's just, what a crazy scene that is. I love that so much. The sunset scene when they're holding hands with the birds, I think that's gorgeous. Them pranking his uncle into getting him out of the military to convince the uncle that he's insane. Oh, that scene is great. But those quotes, like when Harold says that he really enjoys being dead, this fascination with death. And she says, a lot of people think that they're dead, but they're not dead. They're just backing out of life. And I've seen this clip played so many times because it's so iconic when she says, reach out. You got to take a chance. And then she does that little cute cheer.
I understand. A lot of people enjoy being dead, but they're not dead, really. They're just backing away from life. Reach out, take a chance. Get hurt even. Play as well as you can. Go, team. Go. Give me an L. Give me an I. Give me a V. Give me an E. L-I-V-E. Live. Otherwise, you got nothing to talk about in the locker room.
And I love the quote that she says about being a sunflower and how there's a lot of hurt that comes from people or comes to people who are sunflowers that are beautiful, but allow themselves to be treated like weeds, essentially, right? You have, she wants him to understand how special he is. Yeah. And that scene where she's talking about her lost love, I thought maybe this little thing with Harold is like her recapturing her lost love in Austria before she, we see later, she has a concentration camp number on her arm.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's why she fled Austria. That's why she lost her love. She can't talk about it.
Yeah.
And still, after all that pain, she wants this last bit of love in her life.
Yeah. And for some reason I had forgotten about that aspect of it. And when we get the quick look of the tattoo on her arm, and I just love that. I think lesser filmmakers would have really like dwelled on that a lot, and probably even would have Harold start asking all these questions about it. But it's just a quick shot, and right there is enough to, you know, get the history of her, but also why she does the things that she does. You know, like she had so much taken away from her. And, you know, if we all, I mean, it's always, you know, it's a constant reminder of, you know, to myself, that, you know, I live a very, I really hate the word blessed, but I live a very blessed life. And I don't, blessed is not the right, privileged life, for sure. Yeah. And so I try not to take that for granted, but also the other thing of just, it's easy to get just bogged down by the day-to-day things, whether it's work or just, you know, having to make school lunches for the next day, you know, all those things. And so I think this movie is just such a fresh reminder of just like, there's just, you know, so much more. And those things have to be done. You know, I think it's almost kind of easy for a movie like this just to be like, throw everything out the window, because I don't think that's necessarily the best thing ever, but it's always good to keep things in perspective for sure.
I really loved that. And, you know, it's based on this book. And I confess I have not read the book. So I don't know if in the book the character is indeed, you know, has this past. But it's just so beautifully treated. You're exactly right. Like he could have had all of this explanation and we could have revisited that. But just that little glimpse is such a beautiful moment.
Movie musings.
This movie brings up a lot of questions, I think, as you're watching it to yourself. But here's a couple, maybe some, maybe like the movie, some a little dark, some maybe not as dark. But have you yourself ever been preoccupied by death? I don't think anybody necessarily is, like, to the extent of Harold, but just I'll give an example. I feel like I have a little bit recently, just because our parents are starting to get to the age where they're going to a lot of funerals and those sort of things. So I kind of I have been a little bit and just like, oh yeah, I'm at the age now where I have to start thinking of such things. I don't know.
I think a little switch flipped for me just when I turned 50. I was actually super excited about it because it made me feel closer to my mom, because I lost my mom when she was 56 and I was 33. Oh, wow. And losing my mom, I mean, that's not terribly young, but it's young.
Yeah.
So losing my parents and going through that, I wasn't really preoccupied with death. I was just mad about it. But having gone through that, and now that I'm closer to, like, I got my AARP card and a friend of mine from high school died. And that seems really early for someone to die from high school. Yeah. So there's all these things that are kind of making me think about it and how I'm going to retire and how I'm going to live out the next chapter of my life. So maybe now I'm starting to be a little about it, because I want to know how am I going to live my life like Maude, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Next 20 or 30 years. She's 79 in this film.
Yeah.
I don't know that I have her energy now.
Yeah. Well, hopefully it won't involve stealing cars.
No, but it sure looks fun when she does it.
Right. So speaking of cars, do you consider yourself a good driver?
Oh, I'm way better than Maude, that's for sure. But I had to navigate Dallas traffic for 8 years when I lived there, so I'm good.
Yeah. But so my father-in-law could probably tell this story a little bit better than I could, because Whitney and I, we lived in the DFW area for a couple of years. And it was shortly after we had moved here in Oklahoma, and we were just driving down the streets of Norman, and I was driving, he was in the passenger seat, and we missed a turn. And he started going, we missed the turn. We missed the turn. And I just said, this isn't Dallas. We'll be okay. And he just thought that was so funny, because he was like, oh, Mr. Dallas or whatever. But I was like, I was like, yeah, it's a whole different world for sure.
It
Yeah.
really is. I mean, even in New England, people really get trepidatious. You know, I live in a town of 12,000 people. There are 2 lights on Main Street. That's it. Rush hours, like maybe you get stuck behind, you know, the semi truck and a couple of cars at the light, and then people get really impatient in my small town of Brattleboro. But when people go to Boston, they're just like, oh, I don't want to deal with Boston traffic. And it is not bad compared to Dallas. Like I've done it all, it feels like. So yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, it's fine. I don't know. I was joking about stealing cars, but have you ever broke the law?
Yeah. I have. I think there's a little bit of when I was a teenager, my stepbrothers and my cousins, we would go and do stupid stuff.
Yeah.
Like we would go to the cemetery, not because we were preoccupied with death, but because we knew nobody would be there and we could, you know, partake in things we shouldn't partake in the cemetery. So that was our summertime fun, which was not great. We dropped my brother in a open grave, which was not cool, but we loved it. It was hilarious at the time because he was the oldest one and he was scared, and we were like, we made him scared. So that was probably not the best thing. And then I've broken the law a couple of times, but nothing too bad, and I've never been arrested.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. No, never been arrested. There was a time in college, me and a group of friends, we stole a street sign because it had basically the word of the organization they were in. So stupid. And I see now, like, what for sure, like, yeah, no, we shouldn't have done that. That was like city property. But at the time, you know, you're in college, you just think it's funny
it's so
and
cool.
ironic.
Right.
Yeah. But I just always remember, you know, if you walk up to any kind of street sign, like in person, they're always way bigger than they seem from your car or whatever.
Right.
And I still don't quite remember how we pulled the sign up, but I think we were shocked by like how long the pole actually was because of
Did you
how
even
far.
get in your car?
Well, I had a small little pickup truck. I mean, this was ridiculous. I mean, it was in the middle of the night, but like this thing was just sticking out of my truck. Like, anyway, it was really, really dumb. But anyway, so, but I'm generally a pretty big rule follower. So yeah, you know, that was enough, you know, rebelliousness to probably last me a lifetime. But yeah. But speaking of like cemetery, it made me think also in Waco, our fraternities, it was called the float site, but it was where we built our float and stuff at the time. But it was right next to a cemetery, graveyard. And when you went through pledgeship, we were out at that float site a whole lot. And I personally never did anything in that cemetery, but there was always something. Yeah, that was always such a tough time, but something very simple like that graveyard was like right across the street from, you know, like quote unquote, the worst, you know, worst moments of your life or whatever. And so that was real funny. But that same cemetery, we actually, for a student project, I thinking about it now, I wasn't the producer on it. I just was more helping out with camera and editing later. I don't know why the cemetery allowed us access to it, but we set up a whole like fake funeral that was part of our plot, and did this whole setup and stuff. And just looking back now, I'm like, I can't believe they gave us access to do that, because I remember we were filming it and we were very respectful. Like we didn't make a mess and all that kind of stuff, but we were filming it on the weekend. And I remember seeing other people coming to visit, you know, gravesides of their loved ones, and kind of looking at us going like, almost like, what in the world is going on over there?
I love it. I've always loved cemeteries. And I think it's so great that that's how Harold and Maude meet, right? Like they are trolling people's funerals. And then she, you know, she has that great yellow umbrella that stands out from everybody else's umbrellas. And then she steals his car, like all these crazy things. And I love cemeteries. I've always loved them, even to just go like have a picnic, which is what Victorians used to do. Like cemeteries used to act like parks back in the day. And right here in my small town, there's a gorgeous cemetery, the Morningside Cemetery. And I go there for walks all the time. There's a lot of people in the community that do. It's beautiful. There's little trails. It's really nice. So from my teenagehood of like doing bad things in the cemetery to now, it's like part of my daily life.
The other kind of funny, it just kind of hit me. A funny aspect of that story was my friend Mark Blitch, who has actually been a guest on this podcast. I don't know if he will appreciate this story or not, but he was the lead actor in it. And to help him get in the mood to cry, because he's like attending like his little sister's funeral, we cranked up this Josh Groban song, like really, really loud, just to help him get in the mood, but everybody else as well. And it actually helped. But that was part of probably why people were staring at us, is because we had Josh Groban.
Cranking Josh Groban.
Yeah, in the cemetery. So,
that's hilarious.
Yeah.
Rom-com rankings.
It's kind of ironic. We just covered There's Something About Mary, and famously in that movie, Mary and Ted connect over this movie, and they both say it's the greatest love story of our time. But do you consider Harold and Maude a romantic comedy?
I mean, is it romantic? Yes. Is it a comedy? Yes. So yes, I guess.
Yeah.
It's different than what we think of with romantic comedies, but I think that's why I like it so much. It's definitely in my top 5.
Yeah. Yeah. So, so looking at the chemistry now between Harold and Maude, 1 heart being the lowest, 5 hearts being the highest, what do you rank the chemistry here?
Well, Harold is a 5 for sure, but we talked about the difference between him and Maude, and I think Maude's somewhere in a 3. I don't even think, even as a young woman, she would have picked Harold, but he's just so in love with her. It's like, okay, he's a sweetie. But yeah, that's where I put that. How about you?
That's a good way to put it. Yeah, like where the two people are. It might be a little harsh, but I don't mean it to be harsh. I said 2 hearts because kind of what I was talking about earlier. I think it's just way 2 different types of love. And I don't think the chemistry lies in the traditional way we think of romantic chemistry. And so anyway, not a reflection on the film, but yeah, when I think of great romantic chemistry in movies, Bud Cort and Ruth Gordon are not the images that pop up in my head.
Absolutely not. But at the same time, like I was saying before about this really appealing to Gen Z people, it really does show like love is love. Like, don't define it.
Yeah.
You don't have to be beautiful. You don't have to have a certain body type. Like everybody, there's somebody for everybody. And I do love it for that.
Yeah. So the second category is the best friends, or the best friend aspect. And not to cut you off, but I actually put like a NA on this. Like neither of them, there's in traditional romantic comedies, there's usually some kind of support system. And it's almost the whole basis of this movie is that Harold has like absolutely no friends at all. So I unless you have a better argument or have a ranking for
I don't think so. I think you're right. Like in traditional rom-com, there is usually the best friend, some kind of, when Harry met Sally support system kind of situation. But in this film, they are their own support system.
Yeah, for sure. The third one, and we touched on it a little bit, is the soundtrack. So, I mean, we talked about, the whole soundtrack throughout is Cat Stevens songs. And I don't know if I'm pronouncing this, Yusuf is who he goes by now. So if you don't like Cat Stevens, I could see why you wouldn't like the soundtrack. But I personally, I mean, I can't say I'm like I don't know his whole catalog and stuff, but he's definitely, anytime his music's on, I'm like, oh, I really love his music. And so I gave the soundtrack 5 hearts. I don't know how you feel about it.
I agree completely. And it is like a litmus test for me also. Okay. If someone doesn't like Cat Stevens, there's something, I think, biologically wrong with you. Just don't get it. Because if you don't like the lyrics, you definitely have to love that very distinctive voice.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Right.
And I think his songs, well, so the popular ones on here, the opening song, Don't Be Shy. And of course, if you want to sing out, sing out. I really like the song Trouble also in this, listening to this. But listening to him, and I listened to the soundtrack when doing some yard work last night. And I just, his music, I mean, lyrics and catchiness, there's all those things, but I think listening to it, you absolutely feel every word that he's singing. And I think that's why his music is so good and is so perfect for this movie.
And when I was growing up, because we're a little bit different generation, when I was growing up, if you want to sing out, sing out, there was like a whole children's series of popular songs that they made, like they do every generation. The popular songs of the time get turned into children singing versions. And that was definitely one of my favorites as a kid to sing.
Yeah.
And it was just so liberating. It's great.
Yeah. So Whitney didn't watch this movie with me. She was just kind of in and out a little bit. And she actually fell asleep, and I like picked the movie back up, and she kind of woke up, and she was just watching it a little bit, and she goes, "Wait, are they in love with each other?" And I was like, "Oh, just you wait." And she was like, "What?" And but the one, you know, so she was very skeptical, and then I think she started looking at her phone, and then the scene comes up, you know, where Maude starts playing the song on the piano, and she immediately perked up because I want to say, but I don't think it's too big of a leap to say that my father-in-law loves if you want to sing out, sing out. And Whitney was like, Whitney definitely, I think she definitely knew that song or whatever like that. So yeah, it's definitely the standout. So so the fourth category I have is a chase scene or declaration of love. Once again, this movie is kind of a little hard to pinpoint with this. I don't know, when I sent you this category, did anything kind of stand out?
Well, I mean, the declaration of love somewhat falls a little flat. It actually reminds me of my current spouse. Not like I had another spouse before. I don't know why I even said that word, but my spouse, when we were dating, she said she loved me before I was ready. And she was like, "I love you." And I said, "That's so nice. Thank you so much." And that's exactly what I feel is happening with Harold and Maude in that moment. But it does grow, and it is nice. I think the chase scene is that cut to scene with him in the hospital going to when he's driving, and just the urgency of going back and forth between that and that final montage is so powerful. And even though it's not like a traditional chase scene, it definitely makes my heart race because of the urgency that's happening in both of those situations. It's like, what is going to happen with how fast and crazy he's driving? What's going to happen in the hospital with, you know, it's just so fraught with anxiety. And when you've seen it multiple times, there are different times in the movie that I cry now.
Yeah.
You know, it's the obvious time for when you first watch the movie. And then now when that scene starts, I start to cry because I know it's happening. I know it's going to happen.
Yeah. I think the way that's handled and edited at the end is honestly pretty masterful. Like, once again, Ashby just does an amazing job of like, I just think other filmmakers would have this long drawn out scene in the hospital and then maybe him in the car later, but just intercutting the two, it both moves everything along, you know, like, you know, we just have to see little snippets to get like what's happening, you know? So it's a really good scene. So what was the rating that you gave it?
I gave it a 5.
Okay. And then, and I'm sorry, I think I just went on and on about Cat Stevens. So was the soundtrack 5 for you on that one too?
I think the soundtrack, oh gosh. Can I change my rating?
Yeah.
I'm going to say my rating for Cat Stevens or for that soundtrack is definitely a 5 because it makes the movie what it is. And for the chase scene, I'm going to change that to a 4 because I think if you put chase scene and love declaration together, the love declaration, although I like that it falls flat, is not the declaration that we want from a rom-com.
Yeah. So I have to ask you, and this might kind of judge how I end up with my ranking here. So, you know, she essentially, you know, is killing herself. And so do you think she is doing that for him? Or do you think she's more doing it for herself? How do you feel about that?
I think this has been the plan all along.
Yeah.
I think her going to funerals is like preparing her for this. And the way that she's living and all the reckless driving, the stealing cars, there's no consequences because she knows it's coming. And when she says my 80th birthday is coming up soon, she's already made the plan. That's what I think.
Yeah.
And it just so happens that Harold's caught up in this. And she's not stopped him because she's welcoming this experience too, but she knows it's going to happen. She's already planned it. She's ready. And I think just preparing herself with all of these actions.
Yeah. The birthday party was going to happen regardless if he was there or not. Yeah. Yeah.
And we don't know, like maybe she has a terminal disease. We don't know. Like there's no context with this. She's obviously full of life and loves life. Why would she want to do this? But there's got to be something going on for her to do this. I mean, we don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I think 4 is a good place to put it. Almost more so, it's so hard to pin down. So,
It is.
Yeah. Yeah. What about rewatchability of this movie?
Yeah, there's so much magic in this movie, that so many great shots and so much just good feels, that whenever I want to feel this, you know, there are certain rom-coms that you want to watch over and over again. I freaking love The Holiday, right?
Yeah.
It's just like there's certain ones that I just want to watch over and over again. And this is definitely, I could watch it when I get the hankering in the future, you know. I mean, I've already watched it 4 times.
Yeah. So 1 to 5, what do you give it?
I'm going to give it a 5 because it's so great.
Okay. I give it a 4, not because I don't think it's a great movie, but even as much as I laughed and stuff, I think I would definitely have to be in a mood to like flip this on. So it's not something I don't think I could, that I could just like watch every time, you know, but just because I almost like, and also for me, they both work, but I feel like there might be 1 or 2 too many car scenes in this movie. It's kind of like, it's like, okay, we get it. She's a bad driver. She's still like, that one almost to me is a little flexing of like, we have the budget, we're going to kind of show it off, you know, type of thing. But
hilarious. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah. No, so, well, yeah, definitely. I think everybody should give this movie a chance, but definitely if you're a film buff and this has like just missed your radar for whatever reason, I think for sure you would agree that it's a must. You need to check it out. And then also we didn't get into it here, but it's cult-like status. It's got this amazing history of like, you know, this movie was panned when it came out and not successful. And I was just listening to a podcast this morning that was talking about this Minnesota theater. I believe it was called the Westgate. I want to make sure I get that right. Yeah, the Westgate, and how like little theaters like this, like grew this film up to its cult-like status, you know, actually to a point where Paramount re-released the movie and almost did this marketing campaign of like, because it was so shunned in like places in LA and New York, their whole tagline was like, what are Midwesterners catching on to that these like social elite aren't, or something like that. But anyway, it's really fascinating. So I encourage people just to read about, it's just this movement that I'm sure there's like cult films that come out today, but it's so different now, you know? And so to think that people really had to go to a movie theater to see this movie, you know, is pretty fascinating.
And I really loved that moment that my mom and I had to discuss it and to discuss what this kind of a relationship would be and what it meant for both of them. And it was just such a good parenting moment that I really am glad that my mom took advantage of. And we would have these discussions a lot. And I just love that. I treasure that. So I really encourage people to, I think young people will really like it. I think it's good for parents to talk about with their kids. And I wonder about people her age and would they ever? I don't know. And I really love that even at that time, it's perfectly acceptable, and it still is, that we see older men with very young women. We see that, men in their 70s in relationships in movies and in real life with women in their 20s, and nobody really thinks of anything. And then this relationship with a woman in reverse. Yeah. That's why people were so freaking out, but I really love it.
Yeah. This movie is just right. I mean, it was a perfect time for me to see it in college because it provides so much conversation. So if anything, even if someone doesn't like the movie, definitely it's one that is worth seeing just to talk about after it's over. So
100% agree.
Recommendations.
Anything else that you might be watching or reading or listening to that you've been recommending your friends?
Well, I am a total nerd and I love Strange New Worlds so much. I love Star Trek, and I had not watched Star Trek in so long, and I really kind of loved Picard season 1, did not love the other subsequent seasons. And so when a friend was talking about Strange New Worlds, I was hesitant. But I really got to recommend, if you are at all in any way, shape, or form a Trek fan, even if you're not, it is a solid, good show with great characters. Spock is hot. It's worth watching. It's so good. And it's just delightful. So we blew through that pretty quickly. And then I am obsessed with Boy Genius. I am obsessed with her music. Talk about the feels, so good. So I really obsessed with that as my summer album. And of course, I'm obsessed with Beyonce's Renaissance album, like everybody in the world. So it's, How about you?
My quick recommendation is, I'll give credit to my mother-in-law for telling us about this, but it's on Netflix, and it's this Australian little kind of office workplace sitcom called Fisk. It's only 6 episodes, and here's the little tagline: a fast-paced comedy about high-end contract lawyer Helen Tudor Fisk, who is forced to take a job at a shabby suburban law firm following a humiliating marriage breakdown and a professional fall from grace. That description is way too involved for what this show actually is, but it's just a very sweet, funny show. Fisk, this lead character, she's hilarious. She's, for lack of better words, an introvert who just likes to wear her 3 brown suits that are too big for her. And it was a great show. Only 6 episodes, not even 30 minutes, just a good show to throw on and kind of turn your brain off a little bit, but laugh also. So as not as many shows are coming out right now, that's a kind of a fun little, I wouldn't have known about it unless, my mother-in-law told me about it. So I think people should check that out.
Nice.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on and talking about this movie. I really appreciate it. So hopefully we've inspired people to check it out. So I really think I think there's a lot to mine from it for sure.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. And now come back anytime.
Yeah, great. Well, as always, check out moviesareLife.com for episode reviews and more. If you love this podcast, please take a moment to rate and review it. And this really helps us in finding new listeners. I hope everybody has a great fall.